Well, good Thursday morning, everybody. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, your tour guide to the ag commodities. So glad you could join us today. Well, being Thursday, that means it's the day where we get our weekly export sales numbers from USDA. We did get them. And let's take a look at the bunch of data that came out here this morning. How did we fare as far as weekly export sales last week? Well, if you look at the corn, it was actually 1.31 million tons this time around. Looking at soybeans, they were 1.52 million tons. So both of those were pretty sizable numbers there. If you look at that corn, the trade was looking for 700,000 to 2 million. So that one was right on target. The soybean number was expected to be between 1 million and 1.8 million. Well, that 1.52 would fit right in there. So on target on that one too. Soy meal was expected to be anywhere between 50 and 250,000 tons. It came in at 110,500, so A-OK there. Soy oil, the trade thought we could have as much as maybe a minus 5,000 to as much as a positive 10,000. That came in at a negative 1,600. In other words, net cancellations or sales reductions of 1,600 tons on the soy oil. The wheat was 346,900 tons, and that was, I'd say in the lower half of expectations, but we know that's going to be a big number coming up in the next couple of weeks here. Now, we had numbers on grain sorghum as well, and cotton and rice too, so let's go through those. We had the grain sorghum at 119,100 tons. Upland cotton at 146,000 running bales. That was down quite a bit from the previous week. Rice, 128,400 tons. And again, I'll remind everybody what I do is I combine the current marketing year with the next marketing year when I come up with these totals. So let's bring in Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions and talk about these numbers here. Pretty strong on the corn and soybeans, but they were supposed to be pretty strong, so I don't think the market will be too surprised, will it?
No, I don't think so, Marlon. Good morning. Pretty much as expected of these export numbers. Corn sales 50.7 million bushels, and of that total, Japan was actually the largest buyer, followed right behind with Mexico. So Japan bought about 17.5 million bushels. Soybean sales of 55.8 million bushels. No surprise that China was the number one buyer, over 20.8 million bushels of beans bought by China. And the numbers for corn, soybeans, and wheat, while they were pretty much as expected, they were also all above the pace we need to be on to reach the USDA forecast. Now, we do expect corn and soybean sales to really slow to a crawl in a couple months. So it's good that we are kind of building up a little bit of a reserve here. But it is, encouraging that we're at least hitting the USDA forecast, or at this point in time, exceeding it. I don't know the trade's really going to focus on it that much. We have another private export sale this morning of 121,000 beans to an unknown destination. Trade probably will ignore that as well. And we may see some positioning ahead of tomorrow's supply and demand report starting as early as today. CONAB is a Brazilian agency. They estimated the corn crop down slightly, but still near record large, would be below last year's numbers, about 118.5 million tons. And the soybean crop down a couple million from last month, record large at 160.2. So the trend is to see a little bit smaller corn and soybean crops at this time out of Brazil. And trade's going to be watching that number closely in tomorrow's supply and demand report to see if the USDA agrees.
All right, so really no change in U.S. production numbers in this one. Everybody kind of overlooks the month of December in this WASDE report for U.S. production. The big one comes in January, right, when we get the final tally of the 2023 production here in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's supposed to be the final tally of corn and soybean production, although we've seen the USDA revise those numbers at times during the subsequent months following the report. But this report's really kind of one that we don't pay a lot of attention to the U.S. numbers because they'll change demand, but probably very slight changes. Most of the attention is going to be on the world production numbers, particularly down in Brazil and Argentina, where the month of November was drier than normal for northern Brazil. Those dry areas have shrunk with some rains over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen that reflected in soybean and soybean meal prices plummeting. So that's where the focus is going to be is what happens to the production numbers and because this is kind of their start of their growing season, and do these numbers get larger from here on out or continue to shrink?
All right, let's look at these numbers overnight in corn on the big board with our quotes from bar chart here. In the corn market, we actually were up 2 3/4 this morning as we came to a halt. We were at 487 per bushel. In soybeans, we had the March contract 8.5 higher at 13.24, so they did rebound overnight. And in Chicago wheat, that had all the export sales here in the last 3 days, March wheat was quiet. It was down 1/4 cent at 6.33 1/4. The deferreds were a little weaker than that, as much as 4 lower. Kansas City, the March was down 2.5 cents at 6.53 1/2. And we had Minneapolis wheat finishing, well, this morning we have the March contract 1.25 higher at 7.31 3/4. We had beef and pork export numbers that came out this morning, and we'll go through them after a short break. We're talking with Brian Hoops. We'll be right back. All right, now we're talking with Brian Hoops, and we also had numbers for beef and pork export sales last week. Want to take a look at these and see what you think and what Brian Hoops thinks here. All right, on the beef side, we had a total, and this is a total of this year and next year, of 18,600 tons. Now, if anybody's looking at the narrative when that comes out, they'll look at the first line saying sales of only 200 tons for 2023. That's a marketing year low. They might gasp and think, oh my gosh, we didn't sell anything. Well, it's all backloaded here. For 2024, there were 18,400 tons. And you may wonder about China in there as a buyer. For 2023, China bought 900 tons, it says. And if you look at 2024, China was a buyer of 1,100 tons. So they bought a little bit, not an overly large amount. And on the pork side, we had a total of 36,000 tons. For this calendar year, we had 25,900 tons and then another 10,100 tons for 2024. And I was searching for China in the list of buyers on that. They didn't buy anything for this calendar year. And when you go out to 2024, they didn't have anything there. In fact, it looks like they actually had net reductions of 200 tons for 2023, now that I look a little deeper there. So they're not doing the pork market any good, but we did have quite a few sales. So there must have been quite a few countries that stepped forward there.
Yeah, you're right, Marlon. Some of these Asian countries, Mexico, all stepped up to kind of give us a decent number for pork. And so I'm glad you're combining those marketing years together for both beef and pork. Otherwise, that beef number is really a disappointment.
Yeah.
But this is, above where we have been over the last several weeks. I think a lot of this is due to the fact that not only has the dollar kind of collapsed over the last couple of weeks to usher in some of this increased export business, but also prices of beef and pork have dropped substantially, and that's going to stimulate demand. So, that old adage of low prices cures the low prices, we're starting to see a little bit of that in the grain markets where wheat has gotten to a price level now that China has stepped in and started buying. Corn sales have increased a little bit. Beef and pork are starting to pick up, and that's twofold because our prices have gotten cheaper for one, but the U.S. dollar breaking makes them even appear more price competitive on a worldwide market.
We had a colossal drop in the price of live cattle and feeder cattle yesterday. Let's recount here. On the live cattle board yesterday, my goodness, February down $5.42 at 163.55. On the feeders yesterday, when they wrapped up, we had March down $5.72 at 211.75. On lean hogs, well, lean hogs were quieter. We had February just down a nickel at 69.30. Do you see a chance for a bounce here? What's the penny call on cattle this morning, Brian?
You could be $1 lower, $1 higher on the opening. Just kind of depends on who shows up right before the bell, either to buy or sell this market. It's going to remain very volatile, I'm afraid. And we have, we're going to, I think, try and carve out a bottom. It's going to take weeks for that to do. It's not going to be anything that's going to happen right away. One of the research firms has seasonal buy dates tomorrow for the cattle market. So if you're really grasping at straws, there's a seasonality that the cattle market starts to work higher starting around today or tomorrow.
I've heard that. Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Brian, for pointing that out. We shall see. Brian Hoops with us. He is with Midwest Market Solutions, full of great data here this morning on a data-packed day on a Thursday.
Yeah, I got a lot coming out.